Hey guys, in this video we're going to go over CARS, which is an acronym for Controlled Articular Rotations. Another term for CARS is simply joint circles. So when you're doing CARS, you're essentially brushing your teeth for the joints in your body. So you're making sure your joints run smoothly, and there are many reasons for this. The most important one being that you want your joints to have long-term health and longevity, and they're not going to have that unless you move them and take them through their full range of motion on a regular basis. And that's exactly what CARS help you do. They give you a framework for taking each joint through its full range of motion. One quick thing to talk about before we do our CARS is you shouldn't use them as a solution for a known injury. So if you do have any injuries, do see a manual practitioner like a physiotherapist. One other thing to take into consideration with CARS is that they are most powerful when you do them on a regular basis. So there's a reason professional sports teams around the world are starting to adopt CARS as part of one of their foundations for their training, physical training, strength training, and that's because when done on a regular basis, they maintain, restore, and even improve your range of motion, or another word for that, or term for that rather, would be usable flexibility. So who doesn't need more of that? So anyway, before we start, we're going to cover one topic called irradiation, which is a fancy term for just saying muscular contraction that you do without shortening or lengthening your muscles. So another term for that would be an isometric contraction. So before we start our first CAR, which will be our neck, and then we'll slowly make our way down to our toes, we'll start off with irradiation. So as you're following along, we're just going to begin by standing in place, feet hip width apart, and just make as if you're just sending a wave of tension up your body. So you're basically like flexing your whole body, but you're doing it incrementally. So walking it from your feet first, slowly up your body, finishing with your hands. So it's very important that we're able to do this at incremental degrees. So if you find yourself getting super strong right at the beginning, try to back it down, and let's just start off at a moderate intensity wave of tension through the body. So standing nice and tall, we're going to begin by creating some tension in your feet by grabbing the ground with your arch. Next, we're going to send that tension from your ankles to your knees. So starting to squeeze your calf muscles, the muscles in front of your shin, all nice and tight. Now from your knees to your hips, so things like your quads, your hamstrings, your adductors, starting to squeeze those muscles. Again, not all out, but with some intensity. Then from your hips, all the way up to your shoulders. So beginning with the glutes, lower torso on both sides, upper torso on both sides, making tight armpits now. Now setting some tension up your neck. And finally, down your arms, so delts, biceps, triceps, all the way down to the elbows, and finally down to the wrists. We're going to make some fists here. So right about now, a lot of you might be super flexed. Try to bring that intensity back down, let's say to 20% of your maximal kind of effort level or contraction. So now, let's walk it up from 20% to 40%. Picture a volume dial of tension that you're slowly turning on in the body. So starting to feel some tension in the body. Keep breathing as you do this. Now, we're going to go up to 60% tension, 80, and now just for a few brief moments, 100, squeeze, nice and tight, back down to 80, back down to 60, 40, 20, 10, and relax. All right, so that might have felt quite intense. It should have. So once you make it up to about 100% intensity, you really shouldn't feel like you can even budge. So if you felt that, good. That's what you want. You also want to be able to feel those little points in between. So feeling that 20% intensity is important because for the most part, when we do our cars every day, we're going to want simply 20% tension in the body. And that's about it, okay? So unless we're doing some kind of training intensity cars, that's more than sufficient. All right, so 2 reasons we use irradiation. Number 1 is that it blocks the rest of the joints from compensating. So say if I'm moving my neck, I'm not moving the rest of my body with my neck. And number 2 is because the more muscle or more cells that you recruit, muscular cells that you recruit to do a movement in the joint, the stronger you get and the more adaptation your body makes to the force that you're exerting on your body. So, all right. So that leads us to number 1, the neck. So here's how we do our first car. Okay, so we're going to stand up nice and tall, tension in the body, so squeeze everywhere else in the body, up to 20% tension, including the fists. And then we're going to begin by gently tucking the chin and dropping it down towards the chest. Once you're there, walk your chin up your collarbone to one side, rotating until you can't look any further over that shoulder. Once you're there, tilt your ear over that shoulder, lift the chin, and draw a nice big arc on the ceiling out of the chin. As big as you can, without pain. Once you get to the other shoulder, drop your chin again, down towards your collarbone, and back to the middle. So if you experience any little clicks and pops, that's okay as long as they didn't give you any sort of discomfort. So the other thing to watch out for there is closing angle joint pain. So if you felt any sort of pinchiness on the closing angle, try to make your circle a little bit smaller. So adjust it where necessary so that you are doing this pain-free. We don't want to do anything that causes pain or inflammation. So from the side, here's what it looks like. So nice and tall, gently tuck the chin, chin comes down towards the chest, walk up the collarbone, then tilt the ear over the shoulder and start lifting the chin. Look all the way over to the other shoulder, drop the chin, then come back to the middle. So ideally we're doing this 3 to 5 times each direction for each joint. So nice and slowly we'll go to the other side, tuck the chin, walk up the shoulder, tilt the ear, lift the chin, draw a nice big circle, down to the other side, and back to the middle. So again, 3 to 5 times each direction, each joint. Feel free to pause the video there and do some practice. So that will now lead us to our next car, which is our scapula, so our shoulder blades. So this is how you do that one. So I'll show you from the side first on this one. So tension in the body, like always. We're going to slowly begin by raising your scapula up towards your ears, as high as it will go. Bring them forward, bring them down, and back. So pinch your shoulder blades together, elevate, forward, and back down. Again, both directions. So I'll show you from the front this time. So as you're doing this one, it's important to keep your elbows straight, keep your hands glued to your sides, and try to get rid of any sort of compensation through the spine. So try not to round yourself forward. So we're coming all the way up, all the way back, squeezing the shoulder blades together, pulling them back down, and then bringing them back to the middle. So scapular cars, check. Next one we're going to do is our glenohumeral joint. So that's a ball and socket joint that is basically your shoulder joint. So this is how we're going to do that one. You can actually stand for this one. For the sake of staying within the frame, I'm going to just show you from a kneeling position. So pretend I'm standing while I do this one. All right, so we're going to first check that we're in a nice tense position, because the most common compensation with this one is to reach with your lower and upper back in order to pretend or mask that you are getting higher than you in fact have with that shoulder. So if that doesn't make any sense, follow along. We'll see in just a moment. So squeeze tight, get nice and tight. Here's for your right side first what the shoulder car looks like. So I like to bring my left hand across to monitor my hip, my rib on the side, to make sure that it doesn't flare forward, okay? So here we go. Coming up into flexion, we're going thumb first, as high as it will go without using the scapula. Once you've maxed out, you're going to begin rotating your thumb towards the inside, then forward, and start drawing as big of a circle as possible while rotating that direction the whole time. So it's going to end up with the back of my hand facing my hips at the end here. So again, thumb first, overhead, reach up, rotate. This is actually an internal rotation at the glenohumeral joint. And then again, for every inch that I'm moving, I'm continuously rotating deep in that shoulder capsule as I finish drawing this nice big circle, as big as it can be with the shoulder. So in reverse, we're going to go thumb first, back as far as we can go. Once you can't seem to get any further, begin rotating externally. Do it nice and slow. Slower the better. Going all the way overhead, and then back down. Great. So I'll do it one more time, this time with the left side. So getting nice and tall, squeeze. We're going to come overhead with that left side. Begin rotating. Continuously rotate until the back of your hand meets your hip. And then again, one more time in reverse. We go thumb first, coming back. Begin your external rotation. Come all the way overhead, slower the better. And back down. All right. Again, 3 to 5 times each direction for your best results. All right, so the next one we're going to do is our elbows. So elbows are super important for people who do a lot of manual exercise with their forearms, like climbers, anybody who like holds a hammer, what have you. Tons and tons of sports and activities that involve the forearms and the biceps. So that's why you might, people who do those things, that's why they might really benefit from doing elbow cars. So what we're going to do here is we're going to stand nice and tall to start off with. The bony bit on your elbow right here is called medial epicondyle. You're going to tuck that in nice and close to your body. So from here, we're going to come up into flexion. So try to decrease this angle between your hands and your shoulders. Once you're there, we're going to keep that squeeze in flexion, and we're going to slowly rotate your thumbs across to the middle. Once you can't rotate any further that direction, we're going to come back down into extension until you feel your triceps. So again, rotate, come back up, squeeze, rotate, come back down, and then in reverse, we're going to come back up, rotate, and then come back down. Okay? All right, so that leads us to wrists. So for your wrists, it's fun to pretend that you just balance your smartphone on your forearm, just to make sure that you're not going to actually do a rotation at the elbow joint. So if you do, that smartphone would theoretically just fall right off your forearm. So try to keep that forearm from moving. We're going to only pay attention to what the wrist is doing for this one. So standing nice and tall, you're bring your hands down onto your forearm, your other hand, just to make stop it from moving. Pretend it's that smartphone. And we're going to first come down into extension as far as that wrist can go. Now up into flexion. It's completely normal that your fingers are going to be on a bit of an angle. That's how the wrist joint is set up. So don't try to jam it straight up and down, okay? And try to keep these fingers long while you do this and don't bend at the knuckles, okay? So extension, flexion, and now we just complete the circle. Come all the way in, nice and smoothly, all the way down, all the way towards the outside, and back to the middle. Other direction, abduct, so come out, extend, come down, adduct, which means come in, and then finally go up into flexion. That's the wrist, so feel free to pause and do 3 to 5 on each side and give that some practice. So that leads us now to the spine. So For the spine consists of two yoga movements, the cat and the camel, also known as the cow. So the first step to doing the cat-camel from a mobility standpoint or a functional range conditioning standpoint is to do those two movements. So first one, hands below your shoulders, knees below your hips. You're going to round up towards the ceiling. That's called the cat. The second one, camel. You pull your chest, belly down towards the ground. Pull your chest forward, collarbone showing to the wall in front of you as well. And pause there. So if those two positions are challenging for you, I would just keep it there. Practice the cat and the camel and just keep practicing until you get good at those movements before you continue and make it more complex. So how do you make it more complex now? We do a segmented cat-camel. So that means starting from the hips and finishing with the neck, we send basically a wave up your spine, going from flexion, which is the cat pose, into extension, back into camel pose. So that's going to look like this. So hands underneath your shoulders, knees underneath your hips. We're rounding up and starting in the cat pose. Now, I'm going to slowly, pretend there's a little spider on my spine, beginning at the pelvis. I'm going to slowly start walking that imaginary spider up my spine. So my pelvis starts dropping, then my belly starts dropping to the ground. I'm feeling my lower back starting to go into extension, and then bit by bit, I'm sending that wave up my spine, finishing with my neck. All right? So let's do that one more time. This time I'm going to show you a common compensation. So rounding up first. We're going to slowly untuck the pelvis. This should take, the longer the better, so 10 seconds minimum. Slowly untuck the pelvis. And then slowly go into extension. Finishing finally with the neck. So one of the most common compensations for this one is to involve the scapula. So you'll notice that right now I'm in extension in my spine. I'm in the camel position, and then if I pull my shoulder blades together and sink towards the ground, I can make myself feel like I'm going further into extension when really that's just my shoulder blades. So pull your chest away from the ground and keep it there while you're doing the segmented cat-camel. That's super, super important. So be mindful not to make that compensation. All right. So that leads us now to hips. So the way you do your hip cars or joint circles is you stand in the standing position. There's actually quite a few different varieties, but this will be the one that we learn. Is stand next to something that you can balance with. And get nice and tall, create some tension in your body. And we're going to begin by raising your outside foot up as high as it can go, keeping your lower back in the same position that it is when you begin. So as you raise that knee, you're raising that knee, keeping this back from compensating. So straight up, okay? That's going to be important for the duration of your hip movement here. So knee comes up as high as you can go. Then we open, so bring that knee to the side, keeping your belly button facing forward. Then we slowly let that knee drop while sending the heel back towards the wall behind you and go at the same time into extension. So my heel is now as far this direction as possible, and I come back towards the midline and through again. So again, up, open, slowly let the knee drop as you push the heel behind you. Feeling all sorts of muscles working really, really hard next to the hip joint right there, and back to the middle. So in reverse, well, I'll show you in reverse first, and then one time from the side, forwards again. We're going to bring the heel up towards the bum, and then send it into extension without compensating at the lower back. Then we're going to come out slowly up into flexion and abduction, and back to the middle. So one more time, heel comes up to the sky, comes towards the wall to the side, up into flexion, and back to the middle. Going in the normal order here, knee comes up, opens, slowly descends, goes back into extension, and back to the middle. All right, this one's a bit of a complicated one, so don't worry if you don't get it right away. One of the most important compensations to watch is the transition from flexion and abduction into what is actually called internal rotation. So when your heel starts coming to the side, watch what happens if I don't let my knee descend first. I move right here in the lower back. So that's actually my SI joint kicking in. So we don't want that. So instead, we're going to slowly let that knee drop and send it back. That's how we isolate this hip joint and make sure there's no other compensation happening there. So again, feel free to pause and do a couple rounds through with both hips now. And that leads us to our knees. So for the knees, it's important to know that our knees not only extend and flex, but they also rotate. So in order to understand how the knee rotates, the easiest way to understand that is to bring your hands underneath your kneecap, then the soft tissue just below your kneecap, and then that big bony bit sticking out. That's your tibia, your shin bone. So bring your hands over top of that shin bone, and then raise your toes, and simply rotate towards the inside and towards the outside. You probably can feel your shin rotating now. So rotate side to side just to get to know how that rotation should actually feel in your shin. All right, so once you've done that, we're going to bring your hands underneath your thigh, so just above the knee, and we're going to combine that with extension and flexion for the knee. So first rotate, extend, rotate, and then come back. So rotate, extend, rotate, come back. Let's switch directions. Up, rotate, back, rotate, up. So just like that. So rotation in the knees is super important because that's usually where people get injured, is in the places that they don't train. So when we get into these unknown positions where we're rotated and our knees got a lot of weight on it, that tends to be when injuries happen. So that's why it's important to do these knee cars and do variations of them that strengthen the health of that knee joint. So that now leads us to ankles. So the way that we do ankles is pretty simple. So you're just going to raise your knee, begin by flexing forward, and pretend that there's a pencil pointing out of your big toe, and you're trying to draw as big of a circle as possible, a big, smooth circle. So nice and slowly start drawing as big of a circle as you possibly can out of that big toe. So just like that. You can probably feel that shin bone working underneath your hand, so try not to let your shin bone kick in because we know that's now the knee joint. All right. So once you've done a few circles that direction, we're going to switch sides, rotate, and point out of that big toe. All right, so that leads us to our feet. So our last cars of the day. So the way we do this one is we set up our foot's tripod first. That consists of your heel, and then your front middle side of your fat pad, and then your outside part of your fat pad in the front of your foot there. So press that foot tripod down into the ground nice and firmly, and then let your toes hover. So the first one we'll do is our big toes. So we're going to press without using your outside four toes. You're going to press your big toe down and then back up. Down and back up. If that's challenging for you, and for many of you it will be, you're going to bring your hands underneath your four outside toes, hold them there, and then try to get some isolated movement from that big toe. that will make it a little bit easier to get it to move on its own, and that's completely fine. A lot of people have trouble getting proper movement from their toes. That's why we're doing this. So let's now do the outside four toes. So down and back up, again, on their own without using the big toe. Down and back up. So a few times through, both sides, first with the toe, then with the outside four toes. Again, if that one's hard, hold your big toe up while you do it to make it a little bit easier. If you want to get super crazy, here's a more advanced version. So what you're going to do is you're going to spread your toes nice and wide and do the piano. So from the outside in, you're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, finally with the big toe, 5. And again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Good. So feet are challenging to work with sometimes because we throw them in shoes all day and we don't really use all those muscles and joints in them. So the good news is, just like when you take your arm out of a cast, if you've ever had a broken bone, the more you move it, the more you strengthen that neurological connection to your joints and your feet and your muscles, the more movement is restored and comes back. So that is basically the end of our intro to cars video. I hope you guys liked it. Please don't hesitate to send me an email or message if you'd like to find out more about mobility training and cars in particular. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. So thanks for watching.